morning, dear people of the internet, and welcome to, I think, the most judgmental place of the internet, Booktok. There are so many opinions out there on which books you absolutely should read and which books you absolutely shouldn't read. Like, there's so much going on over there, so I think we should take a look at that and see what's really going on there. Is it really that bad? Is it good? Is it great? I don't know. I personally don't like getting told what to do and what not to do, so I usually stay away from there. So I don't really know what is going on there, but until about a year and a half ago, I did work at a bookstore, so I knew pretty well what was popular and what was going on Booktok as well, because that was a very important thing for bookstores. And I don't think the kind of books that are popular right now are that different from the books that were popular a year and a half ago. So I think I can take that with me in my analysis of Booktok, I guess. Anyway, please grab a cup of tea or some other beverage because internet tea is not really that hydrating. And before we get started, I have a very short public service announcement. I'm delusional enough to think that this channel can help me with college and beyond. And you can help me with that for free by subscribing and watching my videos. So that would be great if you could do that. So thank you. Now let's get started. I think the big elephant in the room of reading and Booktok, or the library if you will, is the literacy crisis going on right now. Children read less, and teachers have rung the alarm of children not being able to read well enough for the level that they should be on. I've heard those noises only come from the US and from my own country, the Netherlands, but I'm pretty sure that most countries are not really advertising themselves with these facts, so I think it's a pretty, maybe not global, but it is a big problem in the world. A solution for this problem would be if young people read more and stay off of social media more, because the time that you can spend on social media, you can spend reading, if you like. So that might be part of the solution, of course. And because of this, it seems great that reading influencers have been growing so much on TikTok over the past few years. This had real world effects, by the way. When I still worked in a bookstore, Booktok was really coming up, and you could really see that a lot more people were coming in, and also a different kind of people were coming in. I don't know how to explain this without offending anyone, because I don't want to offend anyone, and I don't think this is initially offending to anyone, but let's leave it at that. Different kinds of people were coming in, and more people were coming in general, so that's great. Like, it had a lot of effects on bookstores in general. Anyway, I think that more people coming in was a win, because more people were reading. But this person on Booktok sparked controversy by having a different opinion.
I do not trust you little bitches on Booktok and your stupid Kindle Unlimited book recommendations talking about, this is 5 stars, this is one of the best books I've ever read. Meanwhile, when I was 12 years old, I was reading One Direction fanfiction written by someone whose first language was not English on Wattpad, and it was still better written than half of the shit I'm seeing pushed out on Booktok. I'm gonna be the bitch and say it, some of you need to go back to a high school level literature class, because the lack of reading comprehension that I am seeing is scary. Talking about Guild, or whatever the fuck it's called, is a literary masterpiece. Almost as if when authors are using actual literary devices and, I don't know, nuance, not spelling things out for us like we're first graders, that I see a lot of the sentiment on social media being, it was too confusing and too convoluted. Critical thinking, babes. Learn how to do it. I love a little fun romantasy vibe as much as the next girl. Like, romantasy is one of my favorite genres. However, that does not mean that it has to be poorly written. And I'm just gonna say it, not everyone should have their book published. Sorry, I'm a bitch.
I think we can all agree that this is not really delivered in a way that makes you want to listen, whatever your opinion is about this. The creator of this video had said that as well in a later video. Like, insulting the people you're talking about in literally your first sentence of a video is rule number 1 of rage baiting, if you ask me. Now, I'm not saying that this was rage bait, because I don't think it is, but people were mad anyways. I believe the general consensus in the response to this video by a lot of people was people should read what they enjoy. Anything you can read is a good thing to read, because reading is good for you. Strangely enough, that was not what this video was about. The creator did not say that you shouldn't only read books you enjoy. It was more about not blindly following the opinion of fellow Booktok creators, which a lot of people seem to be doing according to the creator. And that's something else. I cannot really tell you if the Booktok books are all good or all bad. I'm sure there are some good books in there. I think I mostly agree with what this person is saying One thing is bugging me though, and that's the comment about how not everyone should be able to get published and that it seems really easy to get published. It's not. It's really hard to get published, and publishers don't seem to be on the side of readers or writers. It's genuinely almost impossible to get published if you're not already famous. The books that get published are the books that the publisher thinks will sell well and nothing else. That's also why in the screenshot of Booktok books that I took, all the covers look kind of similar, because that is what sells. That's what people pick up and get curious about nowadays, because it's popular and people read that or people buy that. And that's important to the publisher. It's about making money, just like any other corporation. That's also why you will see a lot of influencers getting book deals nowadays. It's because they already have an audience, which makes it easier for the publisher to sell a book, because they don't have to promote it as much, because the person, that influencer, can promote it themselves and already has an audience. Makes it a lot easier for the publisher. That doesn't necessarily mean that all of those books are bad, of course. I'm sure there are some very great influencer books out there. That's not what I'm saying. But whether a book is good or not is not really that important to the publisher. It's important if the book will sell well, and the good quality of the book will help your chances of it being sold well, because it can get good reviews when it's written very well, and it has a higher chance of succeeding most of the times. But it's not the main part. The main part is, will the book sell well? And also, let me add here that there are plenty of people that work in publishing that care a lot about their job. I know a few people, or I knew a few people that worked in publishing, and they are great people and they care about their jobs. I'm more talking about the corporate overlords here, of course. That being said, I do agree with most of what this video was saying. I have not read a lot of these Booktok books, so I don't know if the writing styles are good or bad or enjoyable or whatever, but I did read Fourth Wing, the book series, and I enjoyed it a lot because I love dragons and I love how they are portrayed in Fourth Wing, like they could talk and whatever, and I find that very interesting and very great. But that's just my opinion. And yes, those books are easier to follow than a lot of other books I've read, if you can remember the amount of characters in them. I have found myself looking up a list of the characters and a summary of the previous book when the next book comes out, so I definitely will need to reread them when the next part comes out, but I don't think there's anything wrong with having a book that is easier to follow than other books. There are also a lot of books that I wouldn't read because they are too hard to follow for me to enjoy my time, and I can only take that every once in a while. You also don't have to read books that you wouldn't enjoy. I think the general problem that this TikTok is trying to rise is that people are blindly following the opinion of other people without thinking for themselves of what they think about the book, about whether the book is good or not, because I'm sure there are plenty of popular books that are not actually that good in comparison to other books, and also that enjoyable because they're not that good. I think this might become quite complicated when you take the quality of books into account, because you cannot just say that everyone should read one of the classics every once in a while because you have to and because they are supposedly good. I'm sure that would demotivate a lot of people from reading. I remember that I had a list of books that I had to read for high school. They were Dutch books and I did not enjoy any of those books except for like maybe one of them, and it really demotivated me from reading. Like, I was reading so much before I got that list. I was reading every single free moment that I had, and that included times when I was dressing myself for school. Like 14-year-old me was reading a book whilst I was dressing myself to go to school. So I was so into reading, and then that list came, and I was so behind on that list all the time because I was not really motivated to read those books because I did not find any connection to them, and the choices that I had were just bad for me, and I didn't like it. And I'm not gonna say that those were good books. There are a few classics that I like, and they are mostly in English. I think the English classics come in more different genres and styles than the Dutch classics that are on the high school reading list. That has not changed since forever. I still believe that it hasn't actually really changed yet, so that's a problem. So I'm sure that most people are able to find a book that is categorized as a classic that they actually like, but you will have to find it. But still, telling people that they should read harder books or a classic book is not gonna help anyone. Besides that, it is kind of elitist as well. And to be clear, I don't think that this was what the TikToker was implying. Next to that, I also think that it's important to think about where the literacy crisis is coming from. I don't have the answer to this, but I do have a few thoughts about this. I think social media and the way that we process the overwhelming amount of information we get on social media every day has a lot to do with it. To me, it makes sense that many people don't try to process the information in a book, which is way longer and way more spread out than the information on social media, which is a lot more condensed and sort of small and a lot of different things. I don't feel like people are really trying to process these things differently from each other. I'm sorry, the church bells go off every hour here. I'm not sure if you could hear that. And to be clear, this was not based on any research, it's just what I think. But the critique is that books are telling us every single part of the story without leaving any room to open interpretation. So you don't have to think about what you're reading anymore, and I think that's true for social media as well. Well, I think you have to think about what you see on social media all the time, but people don't really do that. There's not a lot of space for nuance on social media, and so people are translating this to books, and that's also what a lot of people are asking from books right now. Which is the opposite of, for example, what John Green says about his books, which is that he often gets a lot of things about his book back to him that he didn't even think of, and that he is like, okay, I'm done with my book now, it's not mine anymore, it's the audience's thing. And the same goes for a lot of other artists. Aurora also said this about their songs, and that's actually, from an artist's point of view, very hard to do with your work because you have your own interpretations, but people are gonna think different things about that. But I do think it's important to leave that room for interpretation, because then the works can get meaning, personal meanings to the person consuming the book or the song or the other form of art, and I think that's important in the world. It is kind of a problem when that space isn't there anymore. Booktok is definitely part of this social media overwhelm of information cycle, so that could potentially say something about how people choose their next book to read. And what books people read has a lot to do with what books get published, because we will get more books of what is already popular, because that sells, and that's what publishers actually want to achieve with what books they decide to publish. However, I think this is more of a general internet problem than a Booktok problem necessarily. Like, yes, sure, Booktok has a lot to do with this because we're talking about the book industry, but this also applies to a lot of other things in life. And I think that more people reading is definitely a win from Booktok, because Booktok played a big part in that. And how to get the literacy to a higher level again is more of an adjacent problem. It has something to do with it, but it's not Booktok's fault necessarily. Anyways, there is critique on Booktok. We just saw that, but what is in Booktok? This week I discovered that there are two main parts of TikTok, and they are sort of equally distributed, at least when I type Booktok in the search bar, and I find that quite impressive. And the first side of Booktok has videos like this one.
Books that will get you out of a reading slump that are also on Kindle Unlimited. Get those screenshots ready because we're going to do this rapid fire style. If you want, like, Throne of Glass, but make Throne of Glass adult and spicy, you need to come read A Broken Promise. Again, a completed trilogy where she is pulled out of prison and given as a gift to the Destroyer General, but she would rather jump off of a waterfall than be with this man. And I will neither confirm nor deny if she bites his neck and tries to rip out his jugular. Chapter 1 starts off with action. The main male character is a dark mage and the king of metal. He needs access to the female main character's warehouse, and she denies him access. So he goes around and gets everybody who has a contract with her to cancel their contracts with her, so he is her only option as a source of income. The twist at the end of book 1 had my jaw on the ground. It's probably one of the best plot twists I've read all year long. It gave me the same feelings that How Does It Feel and Metal Slinger gave to me. Truly unputdownable, and you can go binge it because it's completed. Anytime you feel a reading slump coming on, pick up one of the Ice Planet Barbarian series. Before he even says hi to her, he knocks her out, tosses her over his shoulder, and takes her back to his cave.
The video is probably longer than I showed you, but the rest is just more of some similar book recommendations in the same style. I personally don't like this kind of video because the amount of books that are recommended is humongous, and especially if I would like the idea of all these books, I still wouldn't know what to choose. There's also something to be said about consumption here. A lot of people don't really buy a lot of books. They get it digitally or secondhand or go to the library, which is a great thing we have in the world. But so many of these Booktok influencers film their videos in front of these gigantic bookshelves filled with all these different kinds of books, with physical books that they show in the videos, and they often have a link to some storefront in their bios. So they are sort of trying to sell you those books because they can get something from that. So in a sense, these videos are undisclosed ads, and I don't like undisclosed ads. I don't think this is as bad as those Shein clothing hauls of clothes that people will wear once and never wear ever again, but it is something to keep in mind. The other side of Booktok is people being mad or discontent with the first side of Booktok.
Sorry, but the same people who are saying, oh, Booktok is so toxic now, oh, Booktok used to be this, you know, why can't we just read whatever we want to read, are the same people who have actually not really read diversely and who tend to just stay in their own little bubble of comfort, despite the fact that many people in a very calm manner have mentioned, hey, maybe that author shouldn't be platformed, or hey, maybe we shouldn't be reading that author because they did XYZ, because yeah, maybe we should have standards. And you know what? I'm very much the person that's like, read what you want to read, I don't care. But what I do care about is you sitting on here and trying to gaslight us and being like, oh, I'm the bad person for wanting to have standards, wanting to have the house cleaned. I don't know. There's the same people who make videos and go, you know what, for a white author, she actually writes diversely really well. And out of most romantasy and fantasy authors, she does write diversely very, very well. And again, I'm sitting here being like, then clearly you haven't read or expanded your bookshelf to read other authors who are either POC or non-POC who actually do write diversely well. It's because you can write diversely does not inherently mean you can write it well. There's a brilliant Black woman by the name of Ebony Perks who wrote essentially like a thesis statement, like an analysis of why SJM does harm within the POC community, especially over on Booktok. It is titled, You Can't Sit With Us, a textual analysis of racial hostility in the Sarah J. Maas fandom on TikTok. I highly, highly recommend reading it. It is an 83-page thesis, but it breaks everything down from the language of the writing, from the racism of the writing, the stereotyping within the books of, SJM being problematic outside the bubble. And I don't know, I just feel like if you read it, you would understand why a lot of us hold her to a certain discontempt, and why we're like, yeah, we shouldn't be reading that. We shouldn't be reading or platforming her.
A lot of the critique on Booktok is about what people read, and that kind of feels bad, but I feel like I can agree with most of what this person said. A lot of popular authors have done and said genuinely bad things, and I think that platforming these people is bad anytime, which includes buying their books, because you're also supporting them with money so they can have more time to platform themselves and their terrible ideas. Sure, you can make a mistake and you can say sorry, but a lot of people don't. So that's bad, and people shouldn't have a platform like that. The other part of this critique is reading more diverse, and I kind of agree with that, but not entirely, because it's a bigger issue than just Booktok. Not because I don't think that people shouldn't read more diversely or shouldn't empathize more with people that are different from them. I'm very for that, let's be clear, but it's more a bigger issue than just Booktok. Over time, mostly white men have been able to show their artwork to the world, which includes in the publishing and book world. It is in all art sectors, and it has gotten better a lot over the past few decades. Women are more allowed in these spaces, and queer people and people of color are more allowed in these spaces, and black people and people that are just not white men in general. And that doesn't mean that everything's solved, of course. By far not. We have a long way to go. But it is getting a tiny little bit better, so that's already great. But these biases still exist. I also think that a lot of people find it uncomfortable to read outside of their own bubble, because it can be very confrontational. That should not be an excuse. By the way, I think the world would be a lot healthier if everyone confronted their biases every once in a while. I think that would be great, but it's not a Booktok problem. It's the entire world, especially or mostly the European and North American white people problem. It's a problem, but it's far more general than Booktok, and this problem is not going to get solved on Booktok. So I feel like it is a genuinely good critique, and I feel like it would be great if people listen to this and tried to read more diversely. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think it's a problem that this person said that. It's great that they said it, but I think it's also great to remember that this is bigger than Booktok. Of course, there is a far more judgmental side of this mad at Booktok side of Booktok, and here's an example.
These are some books that if I see them on your bookshelf in the background of one of your book recommendations video will make me scroll away and never listen to a single opinion of yours again. Some of these are problematic, some of these are just personal beef. First off, many people will hate me, but I feel like many will also agree. Any Sarah J. Maas book. Before you come for me, I've read all of the original ACOTAR trilogy, I've read all of the Throne of Glass series up until Empire of Storms, I've read Assassin's Blade, and I've read Tower of Dawn. So quiet down. The librarian in my school was very lax with checking the contents of the books, so, you know, I made my way through the series when I was about 14-ish. Why are you reading a Sarah J Maas book if you're fully aware of all the shit things she's done in the past? Heinous stuff, it reflects in her books as well, so that's a no-go for me. Second off, normal people. Sorry, Sally Rooney. I can admit that this one's entirely personal. I tried reading it. The lack of punctuation, or the lack of speech marks, was just a bit confusing. I got it, but I don't think it's good enough of a stylistic choice for it to warrant how annoying it is. Also, it was kind of boring, like, I'm sorry. And I love boring books. I've read so many boring books that I really enjoy because they explore a lot of themes, but normal people, I don't know. Third off, any book in The Song of Ice and Fire, any of them. I read the first two. It is truly beyond me why it is so necessary to have so much sexual assault in these books. And I think the realism argument, I've heard it enough times that I'm tired of it because it's a fantasy world. I've also seen the first 2 seasons of the TV show, and listen, I get it. I love fantasy, I love the aesthetics, I love dragons, but it was personally a bit too much for me, and to be honest, I do kind of side-eye specifically any man who is a huge fan of it. Don't come for me, not all, but it warrants a side-eye. Any self-help book that kind of gives the same energy as The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, 48 Laws of Power, The Art of Seduction, How to Win Friends and Influence People, you just remind me of my dad, and that's a bit scary for me. Next up, any YA series that is not The Hunger Games, because Suzanne Collins, you could never do anything wrong in my eyes. The Hunger Games is the OG, The Hunger Games did it best. The Hunger Games love triangle treatment, oh, they did you so dirty. Last one, and this is going to be controversial, especially considering I love books that are recommended by people who also recommend this book, but The Stranger by Albert Camus, don't come for me. Listen, I got it. Okay, I understood it. I still think it was mostly very boring, and any profundity that is to be found within the pages is like within 5 pages towards the end of the book. I liked the atmosphere, I just feel like it could have been better.
I find this judgmental. Well, most of it anyway. Most of these books are just things that she personally dislikes, which is okay to share, of course. Personal opinions on the internet are fine, they're all over there, and I have no problem with that, but I have a problem with how this is framed, because she says that she won't listen to someone if she sees these books on someone's shelves, and that is kind of entitled, because it really shows that you're not open to opinions other than your own. I'm pretty sure this is just framed like this because it gets more views and engagement when it's framed like this and not like books that I don't like for personal reasons. But it kind of makes it something close to rage bait. What bothers me the most about this is that it is mixed with books that are genuinely problematic. For example, Sarah J Maas' problem is that I think there's more, but that she used the shooting of a black person to promote a book of hers, which is problematic. And quite a lot of books nowadays are showing essay as something casual and not too bad, like something, oh, that happened, now I fall in love with this guy kind of situation. And that is also bad. I fully agree with that. Not wanting to engage with people that are defending that kind of behavior makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is mixing those things with your personal opinions about books that you don't like for reasons that are personal. That makes it sound like you're just telling people what not to read, regardless of the why behind that, and that makes this judgmental, I think. I think Booktok isn't necessarily worse than any other part of the internet. It's just that a lot of people with opinions read books and make videos about that. And there are books coming out all the time, so a lot of things are always happening on Booktok because there is just a lot to say for a lot of people, which is fine, but that isn't necessarily worse than any other part of the internet. Besides that, Booktok has a lot of influencers making books popular. I want to talk about one more popular critique on Booktok, and that's the thing that people say that all Booktok books are spicy and that all Booktok people are just reading because they can read spicy books. I have one problem with so much smut books on Booktok, which is that TikTok often gets associated with young people and also often minors. I think this is mostly a bookstore problem because I've seen so many books that are not YA books, YA meaning young adult books that are for minors, for like 16 to 18-year-old people. I've seen so much Booktok books that are very spice heavy placed in that section, and they should not be there. But I think that's more of a bookstore problem, and I think that Booktok influencers could help this case by making clear what age books are for, or that the books they are recommending are not for minors. So I think they could help, but I don't think it's necessarily their fault. Other than that, I don't think that smutty books are necessarily a problem. Sure, I get there are a lot of people who don't want to read that in their books. That's fine. I personally don't mind because it's just a normal part of life. And a lot of these Booktok people who are specifically recommending these books are also having the spice levels, which is kind of nice because that makes it easier to decide if you want that or if you don't want that. And there are also a lot of people who are explicitly just recommending books that don't have any space. So there's something for everyone. And I don't think that people should get shamed for reading that because, again, it's a normal part of life. And if people enjoy that, they should absolutely read it. Being spicy also doesn't automatically make a book less good, even though it sometimes seems like it does because of this critique. I cannot even tell you how disturbing it was for 16-year-old me to go through my Dutch reading list that I had to read, that I talked about a few minutes ago, because all those books had things going on in there related to this and that I was not warned for, and nobody talked about that happening in these books. They were sophisticated books and everyone just disregarded that part and said that this was great because it was a popular, probably white man who wrote this book about a topic, and also the spicy part was just a side note, but you had to read it and you couldn't talk about it. It was kind of taboo. But I was kind of disturbed because most of these situations were also not kind of normal situations. So, spice in books has been there all the time. It doesn't matter how sophisticated or classical or whatever a book is. But now it seems like people think that all these Booktok books are written just around all the spicy scenes. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely books that are, because they're made for that purpose. It might just be me, but it seems like this is mostly a problem because the people on Booktok are mostly women, and these books that they are talking about are also often written by women. And they are talking about it openly online, even though it used to be a taboo. So I feel like this critique is based on sexism, for at least a very big part. I think a big part of Booktok is using their critical thinking pretty well, and I think we should keep doing that. Of course, that's absolutely very great. Being critical is nice enough, if you are nice about it. I still kind of agree with the first TikTok we watched, of course, but we need to remember that a lot of these problems that we seem to have with Booktok, or that people seem to have with Booktok, are because there are just bigger problems in the world, and it's great to address that, but we need to address that in a more general context as well. I think I still find Booktok somewhat of a hostile place sometimes, but we also need to remember, or I need to remember, that Booktok, just like any other place, is not a monolith. There's so many different people out there with so many different opinions, and I feel like there are niches within Booktok, so it's really okay. I would love to hear about what you'd like to read. Thank you for watching. If you liked my little video, please press the wonderful shiny like and subscribe buttons, and then I will see you next time. Ciao!